Once again has parents everywhere apprehensive about school safety, even more so here in San Antonio after Jefferson Middle School officials found a suspicious list of more than a dozen student names made by a fellow student who had already been violent in a classroom. Eyewitness News reporter Adi Guajardo joins us live with more.
Well, some parents were very upset. They say they were left in the dark by the school district as rumors made their way around social media about a threatening list, and they attempted to decipher what was true and what was not. They say with the increase in school shootings, no threat should be taken lightly, and they should be notified.
Buses, students, and parents packed the lot at Jefferson Middle School.
My son is in 6th grade.
Many waiting to bring their children home safely. But for some parents, that peace of mind was brought to a halt after school officials found a list with about 20 names on it nearly a week ago. They say the list only contained first names.
And until they can be verified, treated as if it's an actual threat.
But some parents say they didn't get a call or a letter.
Then that information needs to come to me.
He says it doesn't matter how small the incident is. Everyone at the school needs to know.
What's the magic number? Is the magic number 1 student or 20 students or 200 students?
A 7th grade student told her parents a boy in her class stabbed another student twice with a pencil and punched him, yelling at the victim that he was on his hit list, and the list fell out of his pocket. While school officials do agree that the pencil incident happened, they have a different story.
It's my understanding that a teacher heard a comment made about it or referenced it. That teacher reported it to administrators who then followed up.
He says campus police launched an investigation, and the parents of some of the students on the list were notified.
There were no specific plan of action or anything to that effect. At no time was anyone on campus in danger or at risk.
Parents say even if it's not a big deal, it can open up a conversation.
We as parents, we have a duty to take care of our children also.
Now, school officials could not release any details because the student is a minor, but they did say that he was not arrested and actions were taken based on school code of conduct. He adds that incidents like this are not taken lightly and students could face serious charges if they do make a threatening comment or a post. Now, he also warned about a lot of rumors being posted online. And if you have any questions, just reach out to the school. Reporting in the studio, Adi Guajardo, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.